Let's see, are we starting a live stream? I think we're starting a live stream. Reason TV. Reason TV. Oh, Reason TV. So, let's see. First of all, let me mute some things that are going to make a lot of bing-bong noises. And if the loud beeper that's up there goes off, I'll just have to stop this. So, Reason TV did a video about decentralization, and it basically felt like an ad for the companies being discussed. It wasn't really that informative or great. There are a few considerations. I just don't think that people are really understanding about this decentralization thing. The ideal decentralization system is one that is anti-censorship, as in it can't be censored. Not that censorship is possible, but that it's simply not available. You can't censor anything. Sorry, I'm kicking something under the desk. That's ideal. Now, the other thing is you want anything that is stored within this decentralized network to also not go away. You don't want things to be able to rot, so to speak. There is a problem with BitTorrent and other file sharing stuff where if you share something on any of these file sharing networks, all these decentralized peer-to-peer networks, and it ages enough that there aren't enough people providing the complete copies of everything, what on torrents they call seeders, that it's gone. It's just gone. The data's lost. Because if you don't have at least one seeder in torrents, at least, I'm ignoring other things for now, because torrents are the most popular thing right now. If you don't have enough seeders, if you don't have enough people to make up 100% of the data, then you've lost that data. It's gone from the network. One of the big problems with torrents is actually the cherry-picking nature of it, the fact that people download what they want to download, and they don't download what they don't hand-pick to download. So that's another aspect of an ideal decentralized system, is that not only does stuff that's published to it not just go away, but on top of that, stuff that's published to it, it needs to be stored somewhere, and it needs to be stored in a way that is not cherry-picked by its users, because the problem is, it's the same thing, that it leads to this whole, oh, there's no seeder problem. What you end up with is a situation where someone's grabbing, whatever, this, that, and the other that they want, and they don't grab what they don't want, and maybe over time they delete some of this stuff or pull it out of their client or whatever, because they're hand-picking only what they want and they can just discard it at any time, or their computer can choke and they lose the torrents. You lose these people participating in the sharing of this data. So the data degrades over time pretty naturally just because people go away. In an ideal decentralized system, the storage itself is distributed, decentralized, and not manageable by the user. The data that's published can't just be cherry-picked by the user. They can't just go in and say, well, I don't want to... Let's do this. The white supremacist angle, right? Like, we don't want to platform white supremacists because that's a popular thing to censor. You want to shut up all the Stormfronters. So in an ideal decentralized network where you don't lose anything that gets published, thus anti-censorship, you don't want the user to be able to censor individually on their machine either. There are two reasons for this, not just one. It's not just that you don't want the user to be able to go, oh, well, I don't think that these people should be able to post things to this network and have it stay up. You also want the user themselves to have a degree of plausible deniability, because here's where it gets ugly. In a decentralized system, if you acquire something that the authorities in your country don't like, you can end up in jail. Now, here's the trick. If you have plausible deniability and a decent legal framework, then you don't go to jail, because there is no way to prove that you put that stuff in the data store on your machine Therefore, you're not responsible for it, because one of the things in a justice system that is actually just, one of the core concepts is mens rea, M-E-N-S-R-E-A, that is of a criminal mind. Basically, you have to intend to commit a crime to be considered to have committed a crime. And this is not the whole ignorance of the law is no excuse thing. This is if you have something on your computer that the authorities don't want you to have, whatever it may be, say it's classified documents, say it's some Snowden stuff, just to keep it out of the realm of the really bad stuff, which is part of that too, but say you got some Snowden stuff, classified material, the authorities don't like you having that in your country. Well, they need to be able to prove that you are the reason that you have that. You have to put a person behind the keyboard. If you don't have direct control over the contents of the data store on your node of this network, then you have plausible deniability. The government can't prove that you put that data there because the client is just taking whatever's coming in from the network and storing it. So because of that, you can't be pinned with it. The authorities really won't like it very much, but the truth is that's what you have to do to make data. This is how you avoid the government side of the censorship. Now, if you have a really crappy justice system, like, say, China, any other authoritarian regime, somewhere that does not have this thing where you have to intend to commit a crime, then you're screwed. There is no workaround for the legal framework. If you operate on the network, you will inevitably at some point have a chunk of data they don't want you to have in that data store somewhere. Therefore, a corrupt justice system will automatically make you guilty, so you're screwed. Anyway, those two things were big those are big concerns for me, because I see data degrade from decentralized stuff all the time. As participants jump out, the data that they intentionally carried goes away too. If published stuff is stored in a manner that is not discriminatory, if it's just stored because it's put out there, if the clients shuffle the stuff between, you're good to go. One of the really stupid things in the Reason video, one of the things that just burned me up, is blockchain. Blockchain is great for the verification of digital currencies like Bitcoin. You can think of blockchain, if you're a programmer, you can think of it as effectively a distributed, cryptographically verified linked list. Here's the problem. A blockchain being a linked list, a singly linked list to be precise, if you have, let's take the example Twitter. Let's use Twitter as an example. You have 10 tweets from a person. Okay, from a unique identifier. Let's call it a person, but any unique identifier on the site. In blockchain, you need to possess every tweet up to the tweet that you're trying to authenticate for that to authenticate. Otherwise, it fails authentication. Here's the problem. You got blockchain, you got a chain, right? You got this and this. Well, the stuff here leading up to this particular thing you're interested in, if you have a break anywhere in this chain, everything up the chain fails authentication. So you have to have everything. And this is the other problem with blockchain in general, is that as you add more and more changes to the chain, you chain up more items, you have more items that have to be checked in the chain as you go. Now, you can cache values and all that, but the problem is, to fully authenticate a chain, you need the whole chain. It's part of the reason that Bitcoin is so computationally expensive to actually authenticate a transaction, because the whole chain has to be checked by every single participant and agreed upon between them all that, yes, this looks okay. Blockchain is terrible for something like Twitter, if you want to take any kind of posting mechanism. Because let's say you have 5 years worth of stuff stored on this distributed system, and all of your posts are authenticated through blockchain. If someone does not have every post you've ever made stored in their data store, They cannot authenticate that the stuff that came before it or whatever, or rather the stuff that you're posting now is correct, because there's a hole somewhere, because you need the whole chain for the latest post in the chain to be authenticated. Like I said, caching is possible, but it gets pretty bad once the chain gets long enough. Blockchain is not appropriate for a decentralized network that's anti-censorship, because any missing data ruins the chain. Ideally, a decentralized storage network, storage and retrieval information network, whatever, ideally what it will do is also prevent you from interacting directly with whoever it is that you're sending information to or receiving information from. And if you do interact directly with that person or entity or whatever, you shouldn't know that that's the person or entity that's storing it. So rather than a situation like BitTorrent where you have all these trackers, they make lists of peers, then you contact each peer directly. What you would do, the system that I've conceptualized, and I believe that IPFS uses, but I'm not sure. There are some problems with IPFS I'm not going to go into right now, is you find other peers, and we'll call those neighbors, right? You talk directly to these peers that you know that you call neighbors. Each one of those peers also has their own list of neighbor nodes. It's kind of like DHT in that regard. You gather a list of neighbors to talk to, and when you're dealing with them, you're participating in this network. You could have 400, you could have 1,000, you could have 5. But what you do is if you want something, you send a request out to one or more of the neighbors. The neighbors then take your request and send that request to their neighbors if they don't already have the stuff, but they'll send that request to their neighbors as if they were issuing the request, which completely drops the fact that someone else asked them. Now they're doing it on someone's behalf, but there's no way to know that. For all you know, every neighbor that you're talking to is the person with the data, or is the person that's storing the data that you're sending out. So if you're 2 or 3 neighbors away, or 2 or 3 connections away from whoever, you have no idea how many connections away you are, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. You don't want to have any situation where you're communicating directly and you know it. What this does is if someone's watching your traffic, let's say half of the nodes, half of the neighbors you talk to are malicious, okay? Say half the neighbors are owned by the FBI, just because why not? And they're watching all this traffic, and they see you send out a request to half of these nodes. They control literally half of the visible network to you. Well, they can record that you sent that request to them. What they don't know is whether or not someone else sent that request to you. Again, plausible deniabilities in the system. Now, they can respond with garbled data or whatever, and there are ways to authenticate this using hashes and whatnot. But if they're malicious and they're trying to record stuff, they could be trying to record what you're doing. They could be trying to prevent you from being able to access something by sending you garbage data. There's all kinds of possibilities. But the beauty of a properly implemented system is that you don't know who you're talking to. You don't know if someone's in the way. You have no good way of gathering proof that someone is the originator of a request, for example, unless you can directly monitor everything that they're doing. And I have an idea for that too. See, if you can directly monitor someone's entire internet connection and you can watch all of the traffic going in and out, one of the ways that you can make this useless is fuzzing. Basically, you garbage requests. So if each link between each node in a decentralized network is individually encrypted with its own separate key, Diffie-Hellman, whatever, If each one has its own separate, independent, encrypted tunnel, then when, say, you talk to a neighbor talks to you, no one can really see the traffic. They can see that you're talking, but they can't see what you're saying. And if the FBI owns half of these malicious nodes, they can see what you're saying to them, but not to what you're saying to everybody else that you're talking to. So the trick to make it impossible to see that you're the one who asked for a piece of data rather than someone else is to occasionally, randomly, have your client and other clients as well that are participating in the network send you a random request that you can't fulfill, and that's it. You'll see encrypted traffic. You won't know what's in it, but the request will not be fulfillable. So if this fuzzing is going on, then it's impossible to really tell who is sending legitimate requests and when. Basically, the name of the game is you increase the noise floor to the point that they can't find the signal in the noise, if you understand that concept. I don't think that anything does this right now. This is critical. It's critical for plausible deniability. It's also critical if you're under the boot of an authoritarian regime, if you are being very closely monitored in any way. This concept is critical to preventing people with a lot of power from being able to pin something on you. And again, if the regime is bad enough, they can just assume that your participation alone is some sort of guilt and put the boot on the back of your neck. I don't see anyone doing what I'm talking about. That's why I'm bringing it up. That's why this stream is happening. There are so many just terrible decentralization ideas. Just like people get these ideas, they know that, oh, blockchain, Bitcoin and blockchain, oh, it's cool. Like, oh, blockchain does all this cool stuff. You know, we can verify this, that, and the other with blockchain. That's all fine and great, but the problem is that blockchain is very limited. It's just a list, you know, and that's just one concept that people latch on to and go, this is a great idea, let's just apply it to everything. They haven't really thought it through. The companies that reason we're talking about, like Filecoin or whatever, like you don't, mixing cryptocurrency into the way that your decentralization system operates, like directly into it, is a bad idea. If it's data storage, if it's a system that allows storage and retrieval of data, then it should only deal in storage and retrieval of data. Now, what's data? Cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency transactions are a form of data, and you can drop that into the network, but it's really dumb to make any kind of cryptocurrency or blockchain part of how a data storage network operates. The currency should be parallel to the network or should operate within the shell of the network, but it should not be part of the functionality of the network at its core. It just doesn't work very well. Anyway, I'm starting to run out of things to mention. The Reason video only mentioned a few things, but it was pretty... It struck me the wrong way. A lot of people are doing decentralization wrong. I made another video about this. I actually have a lot more in mind. One more thing I do want to address before I go. No decentralization system will be successful if it is not also easy to use for normal human beings. Torrents are a great example of something that is successful despite the fact that it's stupid. Excuse me. With torrents, one of the biggest problems is that if you have a user who doesn't know anything about it, they don't understand how torrents work, this is nasty learning curve. Because when you install a torrent client, that's within most users' capability. But how do you download a torrent? What is a torrent? Well, they don't have a concept of a torrent is a file that has information about a set of other files, and you feed that torrent file to the torrent client, and the torrent client retrieves the actual original files for you. You've already blown most normal users just completely out of the water. Torrents are inaccessible to normies. End of story. Now, you might have the occasional normie with time on their hands, or normie with more computer understanding than usual, or normie that's 15 years old and has nothing better to do than figure out how to get music for free. or Linux ISOs for free for that matter. So anyway, these people will figure it out regardless. Like, people will figure things out if they have sufficient drive to. But the problem is widespread adoption requires a low barrier to entry, very easy accessibility to the end user. The normal human being that doesn't know jack about this stuff should be able to get in there and operate it relatively easily. Shallow learning curve, ease of use. And the problem with most decentralized systems is that they are far from easy to use. It's just too damn complicated. So that's the biggest problem that I see. Even if all the other stuff that I said was to be applied, it has to be easy to use. Most nerds are like, oh yeah, this is so cool. I can do this stuff with my computer. And I know how to do this and store the IDs and download the files using the meta file. And normal people can't do that. You can't expect grandma to do that. If you're on, let's call it decentralized Facebook, an equivalent to Facebook that's decentralized and therefore censorship resistant, whatever, you're not going to get people to use that if they have to go much further than download a client and then run a search for decentralized Facebook to find the service. That's the problem. And, IPFS, woohoo, good luck. Not going to happen. You're never going to have something like Facebook or Parler or Twitter, whatever, any of that stuff. You're not going to build a social media network on top of IPFS. It's just, you can try, but it's not really made for that. Filecoin? Good luck. Good luck. Like I said, tying cryptocurrency to this stuff, like mines, tying cryptocurrency in is dumb. I know that it seems cool, it's got this nerd cred, it's dumb, it's just silly. You can make a system where, for example, you can easily send a transaction to someone by hitting a tip button or something, but tying it into the fundamental structure is dumb. End of story. And that's part of the problem, is that tying it in and making normies have to understand cryptocurrency to be able to use your website or to understand what they're doing on your website. It makes a mess of things. You do have to cater to, frankly, dumb people sometimes. Dumb people will use your service. Dumb people, the whole bell curve thing, 50% of people are dumber than that, the George Carlin bit. Yeah, you want those people to use your site too. You may not respect them intellectually because you feel like you're superior to them because you're such a brilliant nerd, but the truth is that most people are average by definition, and most people are not going to take the time to figure out how to use your fancy pants encrypted to be able to share pictures with each other. All right, I'm done. That's enough. Look, 2 whole people watched this. I love it. If you have any comments, please post them below. I'd love to talk to people about this kind of stuff and hash some ideas out. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Clicky.